let's talk about 5 things that may be sabotaging your own personal credit repair efforts. These things are so deadly. Sometimes you don't even unconsciously know that you're doing them, and it's hurting you like the longest and most hurtful way possible. A lot of people have been self-sabotaging their own personal credit repair efforts without realizing the long-term consequences, and sometimes it's so unconscious that it's just second nature to them. So in this video, I'm going to break down 5 things that you're self-sabotaging when it comes to your personal credit repair journey. Let's get you started. Alright, so as obvious as it may sound, the first one is very basic. It's impatience. See, a lot of people think that credit repair is supposed to be rushed. It's a magic wand and it solves your problem instantly. And that's not the case. A lot of people get confused. They think that credit repair is a way out from their existing obligations. And the reality, it isn't. Let's get to it in a very realistic scenario. Credit repair is a tool to help you establish and build and even enhance your credit on a more personal and positive way. Of course, part of that is to get rid of those negative items, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can avoid your existing responsibilities. A lot of people use credit repair as an excuse to walk out of the personal responsibilities they already have, and that's a very dangerous position to put yourself in. That's self-sabotage for 2 reasons. Number one, let's assume, and I talked about this in another video, we talked about don't wait for bills to go into charge-off to eventually go into a collection to start fixing your credit. See, that self-sabotage there is unwillingly and unconsciously, you're allowing a creditor to discharge your file to a collection agency that may potentially keep shopping around to sell that debt if they're not being able to collect because of the efforts that you're taking to fix your credit. And what ends up happening is an endless loop of negative collection agencies coming back onto your credit report, which is a very big headache. It's a pain to get rid of that, and basically it's going to hinder your process to get any type of funding or any type of success to get access to funding. Collection agencies are notorious for doing that, but at the end of the day, you absolutely need to make sure that you take your measures into your own hands. And the best way to possibly avoid that is to ensure that you take that debt away by paying it down or working some sort of agreement. See, a lot of people believe that, just coming into a credit repair process will help them get rid of all the skeletons they have in the back. And that's not the case. So let's be very careful with that. And I'd strongly encourage you to exercise your patience when it comes to that, because it's a very misleading thing. See, a lot of credit repair companies want you to fall in for their services by simply, joining them and basically paying for their services and just ignoring the real fact of the matter, which is the debt is actually still your obligation. You still have to pay that debt. There is no way you can walk away from it. Unless, like I said, you file a bankruptcy, you settle with them, or you pay it down in a way that's a structured program to kind of pay it down. But outside of that, if you go into charge-off and you discharge, and eventually, let's assume you're successful with credit repair, what's going to end up happening is eventually you're going to be limited in terms of what you can access. So credit is to use as a way to build wealth. And I need you to really focus on that wealth building element. Instead of trying to walk away from responsibility, you own it and you do it the right way and you structure it the right way. You hold your patience to the ground, and you're going to have a lot more success. So that was the first thing, impatience and not really knowing the consequences of doing it the wrong way. Let's talk about point number 2. So point number 2 is, what are you anchoring your credit repair journey with? See, a lot of people self-sabotage in this process, and let me explain why. When they start their credit repair process, they believe that they don't have to hold themselves accountable to a certain objective or goal and a timeline to reach that credit score by that timeline. And the reason I say that is because, see, a lot of people get into credit repair. 80% of the times that I've seen on a personal level, people come to me and say, Elliot, I need help with my personal credit, help me out. The biggest thing that I've seen, and quite frankly, it's disturbing, is that they want to get access to capital to do things that are basically incongruent with the aspect of building wealth. See, credit is to establish wealth, but a lot of people don't believe in that, and they want to use credit to essentially pay down the existing debts that they have, to walk away from existing responsibilities, to enjoy and go on vacation, to buy a nice car. They say they want to invest in real estate, but at the end of the day, when you look at their personal credit profile, and I analyze credit reports on a regular basis. So when I see charged off debt, collection agencies, all these type of things, to me, I always ask them, like, what are some of the arrangements that you're making with those existing creditors, as we spoke about in point number 1? And they essentially said, look, they stopped collecting, so I'm just going to continue to move on with my file. The problem there is, let's assume you have a financial objective with your credit repair journey, and you want to get there in a very reliable, consistent way without really going through ups and downs, and you want something that really works. And let's assume you jump into something that really works. Now, by the time you reach that goal, let's assume a collection agency decides to wake up and aggressively pursue you for the debt that you owe. And eventually what's going to happen is all that wealth that you're aspiring to build, all the efforts that you've tried to, pave in terms of your path to get to the goal that you want, is now being disturbed in a very severe way, and it's impeding your ability to concentrate and put your wholehearted effort into the things that you want to do. So have a dedicated anchor, which is a time that you want to achieve a certain milestone with your personal credit, and a goal. But in order to achieve that goal, you have to ensure that you respected point number one, which was patience. Make sure that you take that responsibility with your existing creditors to not let them follow you through your path of success and to interrupt in the most inconvenient way possible and the most inconvenient time possible while you're establishing your wealth. So that's point number two. Anchor yourself to a goal that you'd like to achieve, or else you can potentially self-sabotage, because the way it works is you really have no objective. And because you have no objective and no real commitment to that objective, you're not really sure of the direction that you want to take, because anything that you see that looks better than the existing one, the shiny object syndrome that we just discussed the other day, is really what's going to drive your efforts to reaching the goal that you want. Unless otherwise you have a real anchor, a real financial objective, whether it be get a home, invest in real estate, get a financing for some car that you want to obtain because your broken car is not doing the job for you. Or let's just say you want to establish wealth with credit and position yourself to be a credit partner like some of the programs that I offer. You still need to anchor yourself to that objective. So that's the second point that I like to point out when it comes to fixing your credit in terms of self-sabotage and what you need to be watching out for. Okay, so now we're on point number three. So we talked about having patience. We talked about having an anchor, a goal to reach by a certain timeline and something to look forward to. The third point is pretty straightforward. It's rely on a process that you feel confident about instead of jumping from one process to another. Stick to a process. See, a lot of people who get into credit repair want to find the next fastest way of doing it and try to basically discount the fact that they have a process that's already existing, that they're not really holding themselves accountable to and not following up. That can cause a lot of harm, because now you have two processes interfering with each other, which is the worst and most dangerous thing you can do when it comes to credit repair. Really follow a process that you can stick to, anchor that, to the goal that you want, like I said in point number two, and make sure that you're patient and ensure that your debts are being regulated in a way that you can handle them, and they're not going to be a disturbance down the road when you're trying to build your wealth or trying to establish your personal credit, and they're not going to be a hindrance with you with the banking system or financial credit system. So make sure that you follow a process, which is our third point, right? That process is so critical. See, a lot of people jump from one YouTube channel to another. They look for one content to another, and they say, well, maybe this works better than what I just heard. Now, I'm not saying my stuff should be like, your Bible and you should follow 100%, albeit that my tools and resources are compliant and they work and they're ethical. But what I'm saying is whoever you follow or whatever process you follow, stick to it 100%. Give it the time that it needs to be given in order to see and whether or not it's an attainable result. A lot of people don't have the patience for that. They try to shortcut. They don't wait even 30 days. And the objective is when you start in a credit repair journey, you need to work with a dedicated timeline, which is going to be our fourth point. But before we jump onto the fourth point, remember, stick with the process. That's self-sabotage. If you don't, then what's going to happen is you're going to jump, like I said, to the next shiny object syndrome. You're going to try to find a faster way of doing things because, number one, you don't have the patience, which was our rule number one. If you don't have that, then you have no dedicated timeline, which is rule number two. Then what's going to happen is you have no process that you can follow. You can just jump from one place to another. And as you can see, all this is tying in together. So our fourth point we're going to talk about is the timeline. Stick around. Okay, so we talked about patience. We talked about ensuring that you have an anchor to a certain financial goal. We talked about following a process. And now we're talking about timeline. When it comes to credit repair, when you start your process, give yourself at least, do yourself this huge favor, give yourself at least 90 days to reach the goal. See, a lot of people don't realize this. It's very dangerous because you're now jumping and you're trying to rush into the process and you're assuming that the process that you start is going to resolve all the problems for you and that you're going to try to jump into it as fast as possible, and that's very dangerous. If you don't give it at least 90 days, if you don't give it that timeline, what's going to happen is you'll never respect point number one, which is patience. You'll never respect the process. You'll never respect the anchor that you need, which is the item of a financial goal that you want to achieve by a certain timeline. And then basically you're not accountable to any type of restricted timelines that you want to hold on to ensure that the process is actually working, to make sure that you're following a certain objective. So timelines are critical. So I say at least 90 days. You can go as high as 6 months. See, credit repair is a game of patience. I keep emphasizing this, but you need to know that. Because if you don't, you're putting yourself in danger. You're putting yourself in, like I said, a self-sabotaging scenario, which is going to cost you a lot more time. It's going to cost you a lot more grief, pain, frustration, and I don't want you to go through that. So the reason I'm sharing these objectives with you and about self-sabotage and sharing these experiences with you, it's because I'm gathering all the analytics, all the status that I've seen, statistics basically of customers who are coming to me asking me for a solution, all the people who keep coming back after a few months based on what I told them not to do. And in addition to that, some of the people who are listening now, but it could be you, who have been trying to figure things out, right? Self-sabotage is something you have to be careful with. So give yourself the timeline that I told you. Give it at least 90 to 120 days to see if the process is good. While that, you're working out your patience game, which is work with some of the creditors that you have so they don't go off and sell that debt to make it more dangerous for you. Try to settle it internally. If you can pay lower, then pay lower. Hold yourself to an anchor, which is a timeline and a goal that you want to achieve. And you'll be okay, respecting the timeline, of course. And now we're going to talk about our fifth and final point, which I think is one of the most critical points that you have to be careful with, which can cause a tremendous amount of self-sabotage in your credit repair journey. Okay, so we're on our final approach, the fifth point of self-sabotage when it comes to personal credit repair. A lot of people don't think about this one because it's unorthodox. It's not something that's traditionally talked about. We're trying to get away from some of the obligations, right? So this one is prepare a budget when you start a credit repair journey, right? The reason I say that is I'm not talking about a budget of paying the credit repair company or the services. I'm talking about a budget going forward and some of the things you'll need to do in order to not only establish credit, take care of our existing relationships, but how to enhance your personal credit profile. And the reason I say that is because when I look at credit reports and I look at some credit accounts and I see that there's opportunities to pay some of the debts down, by just simply paying some of that debts down, they increase the utilization. It gives a room to negotiate a higher limit if you call back the creditor after a few months of consistent paying a bit more than the extra minimum payment, which, by the way, FICO 10 would favor. So if you consider doing that, if you consider starting with a budget when it comes to preparing for yourself, when it comes to the credit repair journey, you'll be well prepared. And not only that, you'll be doing yourself a huge favor. You'll be leaps ahead of a lot of people who are starting credit repair without knowing these 5 tools that I just shared with you. Some of the 5 things that will self-sabotage. And us being in our final approach and final point, having a budget is so critical. So consider a budget for paying down some of the debts more than what you already have. Consider a budget for some of the things that you'll need to enhance, whether it be getting a secured credit card. Consider a budget for getting new trade accounts that you can borrow on and pay in installments, such as diversifying your credit portfolio to make it look more interesting and favorable to the creditor and lender's eyes. See, these 5 critical points are so crucial when it comes to your credit repair journey. So I'm going to go ahead and one more time, run it through for you so you can get it by the time you're done this video. You'll be well equipped to start your credit repair journey. Number 1, patience. You need to have patience when it comes to credit repair. And patience deals with the timelines and dealing with your existing debt so that they don't go and sabotage you down the road on your efforts. Number 2, anchor yourself to a goal that you want to achieve when it comes to credit repair. The reason I say that is because that goal is going to help you go through a process that you can rely on in order to reach a certain financial objective. Number 3, timelines. Okay, timelines are critical, but I guess we talked about processes before timelines, right? So let's talk about processes. Processes are critical. Stick to a process for a dedicated time frame. I say 60 to 90 days to see if it's working for you. Then we go into timelines. Based on that, those timelines are going to determine whether it's something you want to stick around with. You have to have the patience when it comes to that. And then we talked about our 5th and final point, which was making sure that you have a budget when you go into a credit repair journey. The budget will not only help you establish new grounds of establishing new credit, but also enhancing your existing relationships by putting more than the minimum payments towards your existing creditors to allow yourself to negotiate a room for a limit increase. In addition to that, favor you in the My FICO 10 model, which is coming up in a couple of months by the end of 2020. So I hope this video gave you some insights on self-sabotage when it comes to your own personal credit repair journey. I hope you take this information to heart because it is very critical for you to succeed with the knowledge that I just shared with you. See, a lot of people go into credit repair and they don't follow these steps. So this should be your absolute first checklist before even considering on hiring a credit repair company. Once you understand that, once you get this, it'll save you not only a lot of time, but a lot of trouble, frustration, and headaches. I guarantee you that. So I hope you found this video helpful. Hey, if you're new to this channel and you've been watching my content, you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing, turn that bell icon on. So every time there's a new video like this, you'll be first to be notified. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below on some of the 5 things that I discussed and what are some of the first steps you're going to take to make sure that you make your credit repair journey a success. And with that said, this is your guide and mentor, Ali Tarafter. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Bye for now.